Welcome to the 60 Plus Best Life podcast. We know that being in your 60s doesn't mean being over the hill anymore, and that, in fact, for many of us, the 60s feel more like a time of bright new beginnings, but with the added benefit of decades of wisdom and perspective. We also know that being in this time of life poses many questions and anxieties. We're happy to bring you conversations with those who have taken actions to create or enhance their lives to experience as much vitality, accomplishment, and purpose as possible by embracing change and the challenges in front of them. You'll also learn from health and wellness professionals, creators, and visionaries who are making life at 60 plus the best time of life. Join me, Daisy Swan, and Kimberly Fowler as we explore this life stage rich with possibility, depth, and new beginnings. By liking, subscribing, and forwarding this podcast, you'll be increasing the awareness that indeed the 60s and beyond hold so much more opportunity for enhanced health, personal growth, income, adventure, and satisfaction as well. Let's change those outdated perceptions that being in your 60s spells old age for good. So happy to have Zoë Kors here today with us. Zoë is do we say you're a sex coach or?
Yeah, I'm a certified sexologist and a sex and intimacy coach.
Great. Okay. And Zoë has written this wonderful book, Radical Intimacy, Cultivate the Deeply Connected Relationships You Desire and Deserve. And it's so beautiful and such great stories of how you've worked with people to become more intimate in their lives, and just a fantastic read. And so well
Thank
done, Zoë. Gosh, we have been in the same orbit for what seems like decades in Los Angeles and the yoga kind of community or something.
Yeah, I mean, I think I met you through when I was working. I was editing LA Yoga magazine, and so
right, Doug Corbett, my high school buddy.
Yeah.
And, so that's a long time.
Yeah.
So we'll add some things to the show notes all about you, and any links that you would like to share with our listeners and community. But let's get started. Zoë, can you tell us a little bit about the work that you do and who you work with?
Yeah. I have a private practice, and I see clients kind of three different ways. Actually, people land in my lap, so to speak.
Yes.
So yeah, I work with individuals and couples who are struggling in their sex lives and their intimate lives. Usually they come through because I'm a sex coach and a sexologist, and that's kind of my wheelhouse. I sort of, approach the self-development world through sexuality and our relationships with that part of ourselves. But of course, that leads to all kinds of other pieces of ourselves. You start to tweak
connected.
You tweak one area and then everything else sort of gets jumbled up and needs to resettle into place. So when you work on your sex life or your sexuality or that relationship with yourself, then your relationships start to shift a little bit, or maybe you discover that you're not in a very fulfilling career, or that typical. So, I would say that there are a couple different things that I work with. One is are couples who have been together a long time and their bodies are no longer sort of functioning the way they did when they were 20, 30. And then sort of understanding what's possible when the body is shifting and changing, and is often, we have a very specific cultural narrative of how sex should look, and the sort of script it follows. I do this, then you do this, then we, and then we explode in mutual orgasm, and that's rarely how it is ever, but certainly when the bodies shift, then that becomes no longer possible sometimes. So there's that. I work with couples who are dealing with desire discrepancy, where one partner wants sex more than the other one. And that's much more relational than physical. So there's those two realms, like, how are we feeling when we have sex, and how are we thinking about sex? And that's kind of the path. I also do quite a bit of work with recovered sex addicts and their traumatized partners. There's a specific kind of trauma called betrayal trauma. And so I work with a team of therapists, and my role on the team is to help couples once they've restored trust in the relationship, and they're kind of over the crisis of the trauma and the betrayal, and everybody's sober and better connected. Then I help the couple reintegrate healthy sex, which they probably have never had before.
Yeah. Huh.
So that's hard work. It's not easy work for anybody, for me or the most of all the couple. So.
Yeah, that's pretty amazing. I mean, betrayal, period, is tough to get over.
Yeah, I'll tell you, it's one thing when you're healing from sexual assault, or trauma, sexual trauma. It's one thing when you're healing from sexual trauma from somebody that you don't know, or somebody that you're not continuing to be in relationship with. But when your partner, the love of your life, is actually the person that has caused harm, it's very hard to heal that to the point of being intimate again. Totally possible. But you really have to approach it from a sort of therapeutic standpoint.
One of the things, of course, we're here to talk about is having your best life 60 plus. Of course, we want to have our best life anytime, but definitely about busting the myth that we're old, right?
Yes.
So given that, what can you tell us about 60 plus sex life?
Yeah, sexty.
Sexy. Oh, I like it. That's another podcast.
Yeah. This is what I can say. Our minds, our brains are our biggest sex organ, right? So much of our relationship with our own sexuality starts in the way we're thinking about sex and the way we're thinking about ourselves. And the first thing I do with clients of any age, but especially, I have a lot of women, and I run a year-long women's program that focuses on, it's called The Naked Truth. And it focuses on, are just exactly this. Who are we? What's available to us? Looking at ways in which we feel unfulfilled, or that we're longing for something that we've never been able to get from a partner, or from our relationship with our own bodies. And so, one of the most important pieces of all of this is to start to pull apart and look at the ways in which we have been conditioned to think about sex, the expectations we put on ourselves, the things we think our bodies are supposed to be able to do. And these, I've sort of defined 6 different buckets of influence on our sexuality. And that looks like family of origin, like how was nudity and affection expressed in the home? What messages implicitly and explicitly were you taught about sex and masturbation and just that whole piece of life that gets sort of shoved away. In fact, we're told not to talk about it, and so and not to have. And for most of us, we received messages that we're not to masturbate, we're not to have sex until after marriage, and yet we're not told about it. So then all of a sudden, on our wedding night, the switch flips and we suddenly feel comfortable and free and able to express ourselves in that way. Doesn't work that way. So family, society, religion, advertising, entertainment, and pornography. Right. And if you really look at why it is that we sort of feel the way we do, you'll find the clues in all of those areas. So that's the first thing, is to sort of unlock this sort of box that we've kept sex in. And for many of us, we've had wonderful sex effortlessly, but then one thing starts to shift, either relationally or physically, and we don't know how to recover because we don't have a lot of options open to us. So in the 60s, there's a little bit of like understanding the effects of menopause, the effects of, unreliable erections, and to kind of look at, redefine, reinvent sex. And so what I like to do is invite people into what I call the intimacy lab or the pleasure lab, and just run experiments in the laboratory in which the only goal is to see how good you can make each other feel.
That's such a great reframing.
Yeah.
It takes the pressure off.
Exactly. And there's, we're taught to measure our sexual prowess or our ability as a lover by whether or not we can make each other have an orgasm. And if we can't, then there's something wrong with us, which is just not fair to anybody, to either partner. So then you end up feeling like obligated to have an orgasm for your partner. That's terrible, or we're taught that that orgasms are something that men in a heteronormative, society, that for women, men give women orgasms. Right. And I think the LGBTQ community has this all wrapped up. They're much smarter than we are, than we heterosexuals in that sense are, and have a lot more freedom and perspective on what sex is and can be. But when you're in this sort of box, that's a dangerous thing, to think that I'm not responsible for my own orgasms. And by responsible, I mean, I'm not empowered to take charge of that part of me and ask for what I want and move in ways that are good for me. And so there's a lot of that deconstruction that can happen so that you can show up fresh to a brand new paradigm of sex. Yeah.
Well, that right there, having a conversation. I mean, Kimberly and I have talked with other people on our show about asking for things, in terms of money conversations, right? It's that in itself, talking about what you want or need is such a big part of intimacy, right?
Yes, absolutely. And that starts with knowing what we need. Yeah. Right. You have to have intimacy with yourself and a certain degree of compassion and esteem to be able to look inside and say, gosh, I would like this so much better if we just slowed down, or I would like this so much better if we just spent an hour, looking in each other's eyes and touching, that's it. But
well, I mean, I think, for me, I know I can do it, but not often do you find, men or your partners that can. I mean,
can do it. Kimberly can.
Yeah, that can, do that same thing. It's interesting with coaching. I was when I'm sitting here listening to you, I go, oh my God, I have somebody to refer all my clients to, because it's the weirdest thing for me, because every client brings up sex. And I actually had to go to my coaching circle and just like go, what? I mean, I like every client, and I'm a health coach, and it, because of my background, everybody brings up business. I end up being a business coach instead, but then they bring up sex. It's like sex and business. So, and in the beginning, I just thought everybody was trying to throw me off my game, and like, because wow, some of the stuff they were asking me. And so, I mean, I'm you were brought into my life for some reason. So here we go.
Well, you can coach me on business, because as great as I am with sex, I'm woefully underdeveloped in running my business.
Okay.
We can't do it all, can we?
But this is an interesting dynamic, right? I think you're talking about women. A lot of your clients are women, Kimberly, and you, Zoe. Power, strength, empowerment, sex. We have a lot of mixed messages about all of those things. Like, how assertive can you be? Somebody's uncomfortable about their body. I mean, we have all these body image things. Oh my God, who we are as a 60-year-old body versus who we were.
Yeah.
Yes. I mean, there's all of that stuff. And then I just think the 60s are such an interesting time, because I know personally, I feel more comfortable in my own skin and happier and wiser about who I am. But at the same time, there's more, I don't know, not more, but there's insecurities.
Yeah. Why do you think, Daisy, if I can ask, why do you think that you're more comfortable in your skin at this age? What things contribute to you being that way?
That's a good question. I think I have spent so much time getting to know myself, certainly a lot of time on a meditation cushion, but learning so much, having learned so many coaching modalities, that's contributed certainly to my own growth, and lived and survived through so many different experiences. So, I do feel more confident and comfortable with myself, and like so many things just don't matter.
Yeah. Can you imagine if you spent that same amount of time exploring your sexuality and getting to know yourself sexually?
Yeah, that would be pretty powerful.
Yeah. So that's kind of what I invite people into, is a journey of really getting to know themselves through the lens of their sexuality. Mm-hmm. And, I mean, without getting overly esoteric, this whole thing started for me, by the way. I have a previous incarnation, and this is how we met, Daisy, because I was editing and designing editorial. I had my own branding studio for years.
Oh, is that right? Okay.
Yeah. So I started out as a graphic designer, art director. And this whole thing really came about because I started to feel like I was unhappy in the level of like attachment that I had in my relationships, and how when a relationship would break up, I would feel like I've lost myself.
Sure.
It was really hard to understand how to navigate through that without feeling like I had cut a limb off.
Yeah.
And I didn't like that phenomenon. I'm fiercely independent, and that didn't really sit well with me. So I started to feel like I wanted to have, I said this out loud to myself one day, years and years ago now, but I wanted to feel about sex the way I feel on my meditation cushion. or on my yoga mat. That feeling of like I'm doing something, but I have a completely different consciousness around it, or a different sort of level of awareness of what was happening in my body. And I was able to both be in my body and observe my body at the same time, which of course later I came to recognize as what Ram Dass calls witness consciousness, right? Where you can be in it, you can be in your life, but you also can witness yourself in your life.
Yeah.
And that applies so beautifully to sex, because there's a way in which being able to transcend what's happening and witness ourselves having sex sounds very kinky, but really just in a sort of self-reflective way to be able to, it enables us to be able to step out of our worries and busy minds and insecurities. And so that's a piece of it. But I think,
you mean it's like having some sort of perspective, you're in it, but you also have awareness. You have perspective. Is that?
Yes, I know.
Because it could also sound like self-consciousness, what I just heard you say.
Oh, that's a good point, actually. Yeah. So let's take an example, right? Let's take an example of a couple who is engaged in sexual activity, right? And so I'll use me as an example, right? So I'm involved with someone. I'm engaged in having sex or foreplay or beginning to come together, and I'm really worried about the 15-pound pandemic weight that I'm carrying on my body. Right?
Yeah.
And so where witness consciousness can be so powerful in the bedroom is that I catch myself worrying. I catch myself worrying about how my partner is going to view my body, or whether I'm jiggly or whether I've got cellulite, and they're going to be turned off by that.
Right.
Meanwhile, things are progressing beautifully. Right. And I'm the one who's stuck in my head.
Yeah.
With witness consciousness, I can just observe myself saying, oh, look, here's the facts of what's going on. My partner does not show any sign of disgust at my 15 pounds. Everything is going along swimmingly. This is Zoe worrying about something that she doesn't need to worry about. And that sort of brings in that perspective of, of like, okay, I'm going to opt right now. I'm going to choose right now to go with what's actually happening and be present to that, be present to my partner instead of present to my weight.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
Yeah.
A lot of practice there.
A lot of practice. And here's the beauty of all of this. You can practice all of this in your daily life outside the bedroom.
Of course.
All of it, I have one thing that's particularly powerful that I'll invite your listeners into. There's just a beautiful practice. I mean, it's mindfulness in essence, but I call it sensual awareness. And that is to move through your day and notice sensations and notice pleasures and stop and pause and be present. I have a whole coffee ritual for myself in the morning because I'm a coffee fanatic, and there's family history there, and it brings it honors my father who we would have coffee, his Norwegian side of the family, like centered around coffee. All the relationships were tied into coffee. So I just take a moment in the morning and I go through all 5 senses. The way it smells, the way the beans sound when I'm grinding them, the water boiling, the pour over, the steam, the heat, the taste, all of it, right? All 5 senses. And I just, I focus on that. I'm not thinking about my to-do list. I'm not thinking or preparing for my podcast upcoming this morning or, or clients or anything. I'm just really present with me and my coffee.
Mm-hmm.
And that, what we're doing there is we're creating the ability, we're building the muscle to be able to direct our thoughts or to leave thoughts or and
it's
to
meditation.
focus on, yes, and to focus on sensation.
Yeah.
And when you bring that into bed, of course, you're able to focus your thoughts or choose your thoughts and let certain thoughts go and be present to sensation.
Yeah.
So I practicing that outside the bedroom is incredibly powerful.
Mm-hmm. I'm thinking of a saying that I bring into a lot of my sessions with clients, which is how we do one thing is how we do everything. Right.
Yeah. It's very funny. I have a that's very true in what I've been talking about in sensual awareness. But I also say, in a sort of a different conversation, I say how we do anything is how we do everything except in bed. Because what I like to give people the opportunity to explore is like, I'm a feminist. I'm super strong. I can get anything done. I'm like, go. But when I get in bed, I want to be taken. I want to surrender. I want my partner to really take me on a journey, and I don't want to have to decide anything.
Right.
That's other paradigms of like how I operate in the real world is diametrically opposed to who I am as a sexual being, so there's a little bit of that too.
Right.
So
I think that's
so when you get in bed, do you tell your partner that?
When I get in bed, do I tell my partner that?
Or would one tell their partner that?
Yeah. Well, it's really interesting. I think, there's a little bit of play along the way before that first real sexual encounter that you can give clues. And, the way I see sex is when I was dating, I'm married now, but when I was dating, I like for 12 years, I had many partners and had a lot of fun and met some amazing, wonderful people along the way. And I think that when you're dating, you're sort of getting the vibe and the energy of someone. Are they someone who's, open? Do I feel comfortable with them? I mean, sometimes I would maybe even verbalize what I'd want in bed. Sometimes it just plays out that way, when it's a really good connection and it's well matched and you're with somebody who's really curious about you, then you can kind of use nonverbal cues. And then sometimes I think I can remember conversations where we had a lot of conversations about sex and sexuality. Sometimes that happens in like a long distance thing, or if there's a big delay before you're actually going to see each other, then there's opportunity to say, what do you like? What kind of sex do you like?
So it's that communication piece, all, right there.
Yes. Yeah.
And vulnerability. I mean,
and vulnerability. But I'll tell you something, it doesn't feel so vulnerable when you feel solid in yourself. When you have a relationship with yourself and you give yourself permission to be who you are and to like what you like, then you're either a match or you're not a match. And if someone judges you for what you like in bed, then they're not a good match.
Right. Yeah, I think that's the feeling comfortable in your own skin thing.
Yes.
Like this is it, this
yeah.
I am what I am.
Yeah. There's such freedom in that. And it, the expectations of a 60-year-old's body or 70-year-old's body is completely different than the expectations of a 20-year-old body. Right? So part of what we do to ourselves is we compare ourselves to our 20-year-old selves.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or, or in me, like I looked at a picture of myself 10 years ago. I was like, oh, boy, I'd love to look like that again, even 10 years ago.
Yeah, right? Exactly.
But I find that I can, I'm actually 59. At this age, I'm able to just find find more self-esteem in what I've accomplished, who I am, what I've done, my sense of humor, than just how my body looks.
Sure. Absolutely. Well, that is the beauty of growing up. And then we have the dynamics that you mentioned, the unpredictability of what the body can do.
Should we talk about specifics of?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really rough for couples, when women's bodies are responding a certain way and men's bodies are maybe not responding the way they want them to.
Or vice versa. I mean, I've had clients that, that talk to me about, their wives or, and I'm giving suggestions on what to do. I'm not a doctor, but talking about Mona Lisa treatments and, all this stuff. And it's like, the body can work. There's ways to do it if you want it. It's like, but it's interesting. I mean, for me, it's like, I like menopause was definitely difficult in that area, but I went, okay, I'm a sexual being. I want to fix this. And I did research and figured it out. But a lot of women just decide not to have sex, and then that's, that's sad, but that comes up a lot with, when I'm talking to women and, guys, clients, their wives just decided, I don't want to have sex anymore.
The thing about sex is that we think of it as penis and vagina sex. We think of it as like, that's what sex is and nothing else is sex. You could have an unbelievably exciting and flourishing and nourishing sex life and completely avoid penetration. So yes, so there are a lot of things that you can do. You can take bioidentical hormones to stave off like vaginal atrophy, or where the tissues get very thin and easily torn, and then that can cause pain. Many things can cause pain, but that's a major one in menopause for women, for people with vulvas and vaginas. So there's also topical estrogen that you can just put a little dab and it gets absorbed and then keeps the tissues more supple. There are wonderful products like Foria, Foria, Foria Intimacy, CBD, sexual enhancer. It's CBD oil suspended in coconut oil, and it comes in a little spray bottle, and it is magical. It is so amazing.
We're going to blow up their site.
Oh my goodness. You spray a couple pumps on your vulva and you wait about 15 minutes and then you get going, and it feels, it sort of plumps your tissues and it feels sort of like buzzy electric, and it's just fabulous stuff. There's a lube called Aloe Cadabra that's made out of aloe and purified water. And for me, that's about the closest consistency to natural vaginal fluid that I've found. And it's edible, and they come in flavors, and it's lovely, water-based. So it's good for condoms. If you're using condoms, at the age of 60, you're probably using condoms if you are for health reasons, to prevent diseases and things. But there's that as well. You can start to with sex if you're dealing with fragile vaginal tissues or unreliable erections, the two things that really get in the way of having penetrative sex. You can, have a whole sex life that is manual and oral, You can work together. Sometimes there's like mutual masturbation, or supporting your partner while they self-pleasure, or all these things can be incredibly erotic and intimacy building. You just have to give yourself permission and choose to leave shame behind, or just self-judgment behind, and just, show up. This is what I have. Let's see how good we can make each other feel.
That's that lab you were mentioning before.
Yeah.
The experiments.
Right. Safe to fail experiments. Do you know that term?
Safe to fail. Say more.
Yeah. So it's along the lines of, like, somebody one time said to me, I was making like a big ask, and they said, look, I can't say, unless I know I can say it's okay to say no, I won't be able to say yes. So you just sort of understand, you agree together that there's no right or wrong here. We're going to try some things, and we're going to have a good attitude about it, and it's going to be fun, and we can laugh at ourselves. And, I would love for you to try this on me. I don't know if my body's going to respond, or, I'm not sure. I'm going to try this new oral sex technique on you, and, let me know how it feels. And if it's a fail, then it's fine. This didn't work. I don't prefer that.
Right.
Let's do that thing we did the other day. That feels better for me. But it can be an adventure together,
Right. Which, again, takes some bravery.
Yes.
I think
it does.
I think bravery has come up, right, Kimberly, in some of our other conversations.
Yeah, definitely.
That's I do think that we are more equipped for that bravery at this time in life, which is part of what can make this time in life so great.
Yeah.
That you've gotten through whatever you've gotten through, so I can do this too.
Yeah. I want to talk a little bit about desire also.
Yeah, please.
Yeah. That's an ongoing sort of struggle, I think, for people of all ages, and gets more for people who are in a long-term monogamous relationship. It's particularly challenging to sort of, and Esther Perel is just the absolute maven of sustaining desire in a long-term monogamous relationship. So, and there's so much to learn from her about how to do that, how to stoke the fire, and what things create desire, and exploring that with your partner. So that's always a good resource. She wrote a book, Mating in Captivity is really the book that really dives into that.
Yeah.
Or her podcast. But
Where Shall We Begin is her podcast.
Yes. Yeah. But, desire is often, we sort of have, like, desire and arousal are two different things, right? Desire is the drive to have sex. And arousal is the body's response to sexual activity or sexual thoughts. And so when we're younger, so often we become aroused, even, like at will, or even without us really knowing it. We'll see something or have a thought, or that leads to a bit of a state of arousal, and then desire follows. When we're older, our bodies don't respond quite like that. We have fewer periods of like direct arousal, spontaneous arousal. And so we have to really do things in our relationship. Say, if you've been together a long time, people who enter into new relationships in their 60s or, 50s, 60s, 70s, there's a little bit of that heat and curiosity of discovery, right? So that can pick up a little bit. But for couples who have been together for a very long time, and most people, they feel like best friends, they feel like, partners in life, but they don't necessarily feel like lovers anymore.
Yeah.
So it becomes even more important to lead with the heart, to lead with the mind, to flirt with each other, to appreciate each other in that way, and to really sweeten up the relationship, and have that lead. Like I often think of like, teenage sex or sex in your 20s and 30s, like you're leading from your genitals, but in your 60s and 70s, you're leading from your heart. So that's a big thing. Like couples who are in long-term monogamous relationships, I always coach them to flirt with each other, to see themselves as sexual beings, and to step into that identity and play that out a little bit,
Yeah, that's great. That's a great way to frame it. And I mean, I think what can be so scary is there are other people out there, younger, attractive people. I don't know. This is where my mind goes, when you've been in a relationship for a long time, and the comparison thing can come in.
Yeah, totally. I mean,
you really have to have that safety when you're in that long-term relationship.
Yeah, is the fear that your partner's going to want someone else or go somewhere else?
Yeah.
Or compare.
Right.
Yeah. I mean,
that's just mind management, I guess.
Well, and there's a reality to that, I mean, I mean, let's be brutally honest here. We live in a society where, youth is worshipped, and we're sort of obsessed with youth. And that's why we see so many actresses, with all kinds of fillers in their face beyond the point of recognition.
Yeah.
And sometimes Tom Cruise is looking a little odd these days, but we often don't see that with men. We as a culture, as a society, we allow men to age gracefully, or age however they age.
Right.
And with women, we don't want them to age. And there's, I mean, we do see Al Pacino, I think, just had a baby he's 83. He just had a baby with like, a 20-something-year-old.
Oh my God.
Oh, so, I mean, that is a reality. So to think about those things, of course, but I think in the end, look, it is what it is. And you are who you are. There's incredible value in being able to, this is a tall order. This is why I paused.
Yeah.
There's incredible value in being able to come home to yourself.
Right.
And to not, and to sort of allow yourself, and look, I'm 59. Don't think I don't look at 25-year-old men and like salivate, my son is 16. His friend who I knew when he was in kindergarten hopped in the car the other day, and I was like, whoa, this is inappropriate. And that's part of it. But that also can fuel your relationship. I speak with a lot of couples who are overly concerned that their partner could be, how do I know my partner's not fantasizing about someone else when they're having sex with me? And, what I really want to say to them, of course, I'm much more sensitive and open and talk to them about their fears and their feelings and their insecurities and all of that. But really what I want to say is, well, good. Who cares? They're there with you. And they're, I mean, we all have so many fantasies going on when we are engaging in sexual activity. It's sort of, look, in Tantra, in the tantric world, which if you don't know what Tantra is, it's a sort of ancient philosophy from southern India, largely, at least the lineage that I was initiated in is in southern India, but there's, Tibetan Tantra and, but it's an Eastern philosophy in which sex plays a big part. And Tantra in this country, there's like Neo-Tantra in the Western world, in Europe and the United States, that sort of extracted the sexual practices from the deep spirituality. It's and so when you're sort of practicing Tantra, that the idea of what sex is that sexual energy is life. It's creative life force energy. It's not something separate from any other energy. You're just feeling it in an area of your body and you're cultivating it in a way that plays out sexually, but it's life force energy. So when you go to a party and you see all these beautiful people, men and women or anywhere in between, and you're like, wow, curious and aroused, in your whole senses, you're engaged and curious and wanting to, find out about someone. You find them attractive. That's just that energy that you feel, that buzz that you feel is life force energy. So we do that with all kinds of things, not just other people. We do it with flowers, beautiful flowers, or a sunset, or
food.
I was just going to say, or like a delicious meal, like that pleasureful feeling. You can just, take that as it comes and put it in your body and then bring it to the bedroom. We're gathering up all of the aliveness in the world and then acting on it sexually with our partner. In that act, you might recall certain things that were exciting during the day or the week,
Right. It makes me think of one of the things, I think it's the Gottmans, the couples counselors, just talking about novelty, right? Bringing a sense of novelty. We're doing things together as a couple that are new to you.
Right.
So when people travel together, or I remember a friend years ago said, a guy, very accomplished guy who had been married for a long time. And he said, oh yeah, we all want hotel sex. Like if they just went to a hotel with their wives, no matter how long they've been married, it would be different. Or maybe they'd have sex, period.
Yeah. Being out of it's easy to get sort of in a groove of just snuggling up, reading a book, snuggling up, turning off the light. But when you're in that new environment, right? Vacation sex is what I hear it referred to a lot.
Right. Right. I mean, especially when you've gone through having kids and, you're afraid somebody's going to open the door or something's going to happen or whatever, just getting away.
Yeah.
It's so important.
Yeah. Working with fantasies too can provide novelty, like sharing fantasies, reading erotica or like sharing, building a fantasy together, or one partner can take the fantasy and tell the story, and it takes a little energy and creativity, but it can really juice the relationship.
So we're coming to the close here, but I want to ask about, for people who may find themselves single and weren't planning on being single at this time in their life, because we've had other episodes where we were talking about the graying, what is it? The gray wave?
Gray wave. Yes.
Right, of divorce. So people are out there dating and, hearing things like the expectation about sex, when you're supposed to have sex or not have sex, in dating. And I'm just curious what you would say about that. Do you know what I mean? Like,
I'm not sure I know. I hear the question in there. I think people should date and have sex whenever they feel like having sex.
I guess, I think there was a story that you talked about. I
about somebody having this idea that if they were going to have sex, it meant that this person that they were going to be with was going to be the person they were going to be with for the rest of their lives.
Yeah.
And there's, it's a new thing when you're single in your 60s and like you've been with somebody, like, if you got married and you thought this was the person forever and you had children, and now it's different. You're not planning on having children with somebody. You know what I mean? Like, so I do. So is there more freedom? Can people let go of some of the expectation? Or the pressure?
Well, here, I'll approach this way. I have a group of women literally a group of women in this year-long program.
Mm-hmm.
And many of them are in their 60s and newly single.
Uh-huh.
And what they're finding is an opportunity. Of course, they were attracted to me. So this is a particular kind of group of people. But what they've found is that in their 60s, and most of them are mid 60s, that they are that they've got a new lease on life. And they're all learning how to self-pleasure in a much more expansive way than they ever have, which is something that we didn't touch on that I think is really important, particularly for women, to really cultivate a relationship with your own body that feels, you should be able to, and I use the word should. I'd love for you to be able to. Reach like unparalleled levels of pleasure where it feels like your hair follicles are having an orgasm. And that happens on your own, and there are ways to go about that. We enter into this weeks long self-pleasure practice where we hold off on having an orgasm and feel the energy of that life force energy build up and then all of that. So it's what I love to think is that all women in their 60s who find themselves, even in a marriage as well, but don't miss the opportunity to learn your body to that extent. Emily Nagoski has a book called Come As You Are. It's like an owner's manual for female sexuality.
Great title.
Yeah. And so that's a great book. I have a lot of this content in my book as well, in Radical Intimacy, about self-pleasure and vulva and penis massages and all kinds of things. So cultivating that kind of sexual relationship with yourself puts you in a place of being a better lover because you can tell people what you want, feeling self-assured because you're not dependent on a partner to give you an orgasm. I'm using air quotes. And sort of revitalizing your sex life all on your own and taking that power back. That puts you in a position of being able to have sex without feeling that dependence. There's a chapter in my book called The Attachment Myth. And it's actually, it's for another podcast, another episode. It's really interesting that addresses just this, and this is the story that you referenced. It's like we are conditioned as women to believe that when we have sex with someone, we biologically bond to them in a way that is like pair bonding. And it's not true. And there are many women who say, as soon as I sleep with someone, like someone said, my heart is in my vagina. Someone in my group said this, and I was I'm gonna get it out of your vagina before this year is over. That's not where your heart belongs. Heart belongs in your chest, and your vagina belongs between your legs. Come on now. And so there's that. To me, is just a sort of I'm a very emotional person, by the way. Like I understand, of course I understand that. And
well, we're talking about oxytocin, right? Isn't that what it's called?
Well, yes, we are. But, men have oxytocin too, and so it's also, I get in this thing, you can hear my frustration in my voice. That's such a good topic. But, the idea that we have a beautiful moment, we feel a level of attachment is normal.
Mm-hmm.
And so sit with that, breathe into that, notice that, and don't make up all kinds. Women get ourselves in trouble because we project the fantasy, the Disney fantasy about like what this sex means.
Right.
And it's, look, we, as women or people with vulvas, we let people into our body. We're taking people into our body.
Yes.
That's very tender. It's a much more vulnerable, tender place than to have a penis that goes into somebody else's body.
Right.
That's the truth.
Yeah.
But there's a way to manage that without the deception of, this is my lifelong partner and we're going to do this forever. Like, let it come and let it go. And that's like really a metaphor for life. I have this mantra, right? I'll share this mantra, not a Sanskrit mantra, but an English one. On the inhalation, you say, I receive life as it comes to me. And then on the exhalation, you say, I let go. I receive life as it comes to me. I let go. And that is a little bit of a metaphor of sex. So, maybe you try, if you're having intercourse, maybe you try on the thrust inward, I receive life as it comes to me. And on the exit, I let go.
Yeah. That's beautiful. Yeah. Yeah. I will oftentimes say, hold things lightly. Right. Because it's so easy to, even just to go to something very mundane, but you're interviewing for jobs and getting all freaked out about, am I going to get this? Am I going to get this? And you just have to take your hands off that. Yeah. So many things, relationships or hoping to buy a home or whatever it is, get the relationship you want.
Yeah. A teacher of mine once said, she said, everything that I let go of has claw marks in it. Like
everything I let go of has claw marks in it.
From holding it so tightly. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a good one.
So don't hold on to your lovers with and leave claw marks.
Right.
Unless you've had a wild night of sex and kinky sex. Claw marks are okay then.
Wow. Well, that's a great place to finish up, I think. We have so much more we could talk about. We'll have to do this again.
I would love that.
So great. Well, thank you, Zoe. This is great. And,
thank you, Kimberly and Daisy. So much fun.
Thanks for listening to the 60 Plus Best Life podcast. We hope you've learned useful and inspiring information today. We welcome your comments and also your suggestions of topics we need to discuss. If you know of someone you'd like to hear on our podcast, please share. We think of this podcast as a way to grow a robust community of people who are making life better at 60 plus. People who are living their best life. Thanks again for listening to, subscribing, and sharing the 60 Plus Best Life podcast.